By now, you guys know I like to do these deep dives on very random pieces of information in video games, whether it's internal for the system, external, or just some weird moments in history. And today we're looking at the PlayStation 3 and a feature that I actually did not know was a thing up until very recently, and it actually comes back to a disc that only your PlayStation 3 console can actually use. No other game console. And no, I'm not talking about a PlayStation 3 game. I'm talking about something a bit more specialized, actually, and to me, it makes the PlayStation 3 console even more impressive. The 6th generation of consoles started to change the way we looked at our traditional video game systems. Up to this point, they were mostly designed to do one thing, and that's play games. Sure, your PS1 or Saturn could play music CDs, but that wasn't necessarily a major selling point during that generation. However, once the PS2 was introduced with a DVD player, things took a turn, and we started to see these game consoles as more. They were media boxes. If you had a PS2, there was no reason to buy a DVD player to go alongside of it in your entertainment center, which means that new game console actually had a ton of added value, and these different companies started to double and even triple down on that idea going forward. In fact, the introduction of Sony's next system with the PS3 was a major example of a do-it-all box. We all remember the infamous presentation where PlayStation executives took turns providing meme after meme after meme, but before the historical $600 slide, there was one that showed the capabilities of the PS3, including the forms of media it could handle.
PlayStation utilizes Blu-ray as one of its storage mediums, but is also compatible with a huge variety of optical disc media used in consumers' homes today.
And they weren't kidding. Most of the people who bought a PlayStation 3 early on probably didn't realize half the stuff that this system was compatible with. Even to this day, people are making infographics to go over what each PS3 model can and cannot do, and one of those graphics caught my eye since it outlined a form of media I wasn't aware of: Super Audio CD. Apparently, this is a format that is only compatible with the original fat model PS3 systems that were compatible with PS2 games. Pretty much as soon as year one of the PS3 ended, Sony started to revise the internals of the console to make it cheaper, and they did this a lot. There are so many different model numbers to sift through, but the easiest 3 categories to remember are fat, slim, and super slim. For the Super Audio CD, we have to dive a bit deeper into the fat model category, with models A01, B01, and E01 being the most common models that support this, since this feature was removed when Sony made the jump to models without PS2 backwards compatibility. Now, fortunately, I do have a compatible PlayStation 3 that fits the description here, but that does bring up the big question: what exactly is a Super Audio CD anyway? Without offending all of the big-time audiophiles out there, I'll do my best to give a quick overview of what we're dealing with here. I came up in the 90s and ran on the basics, which was mostly whatever played during those Dragon Ball AMVs that you spent a day downloading on Kazaa or LimeWire. Also, little known fact, the Gundam Wing AMVs at this time were super underrated, and I think held their own against some of the classics from this era. Anyway, I at least remember the big CD craze with everyone walking into school with their CD players and stopping every 20 feet to build up their anti-skip meter. It makes sense that Sony and Philips would pursue a successor to the CD, since technically we still use them now, and that development actually brings us up to the SACD, or that Super Audio CD format. It was introduced in 1999, and the main thing to take away from this format is it did provide a higher quality listening experience with a higher bitrate and multi-channel support for those with nice surround sound systems. The capacity on disc made a sizable leap to 4.7 gigabytes, nearly 7 times the size of the 700 megabyte CD. There was even an option for a dual-layer SACD, bringing the size up to 8.5 gigabytes, meaning it completely rivaled DVDs at the time, at least in terms of raw storage capacity. Do you remember when Sony introduced the PlayStation 3 up on stage for $600? There was an audible gasp from the audience. Well, I want you to keep that in mind for this next section, because it turns out in the world of Super Audio CD, that's actually downright cheap. This is Sony's SCD-1 player. It was released in 1999 and was set to help launch the Super Audio CD generation. It's capable of reading direct stream audio and coded recordings, and with reviews still up online from 25 years ago, it looks like it was a pretty good SACD player. It also came in at the low price of $5,000. Yeah, it turns out getting into the SACD field wasn't cheap, although I'm sure most audiophiles out there aren't surprised to hear any of this. Even now, looking up this model, it's still expensive with listings near $2,000 for one described as junk or broken. It looks like a fully working one is listed at about $3,000. I have to imagine these are top-of-the-line professional players that are marked in the thousands, since I was able to find some more basic players that are floating around on eBay for roughly $250 shipped. Fortunately, I already have an SACD player with this 80GB PS3 model. I double-checked the original box, and sure enough, it has a logo here for it and everything. I picked up this copy of Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon, and it's actually a hybrid disc, meaning it has a layer for regular CD players and one for super audio CD players. Pretty cool idea to make it backwards compatible with the previous generation players. These are all over eBay at varying prices, and despite it not really catching on with mainstream consumers, there were a lot of different albums released on the format. I already had my PS3 set up normally through HDMI with an optical cord going from the TV to my sound system, so I popped the disc in to see if it would work right out of the gate. The regular CD layer was picked up along with that SACD layer. They both show up as options in the cross-media bar. There used to be a service that would let you pull data for your CD from the internet on the PS3, but it looks like that's been discontinued, so I won't be getting any fancy cover art here, sadly. Everything plays fine with the standard CD option, but when I switched over to SACD, I wasn't getting any sound. After playing around with the settings for audio on the console and my TV, I still wasn't able to make it work, so I decided to just route the optical cable from the PS3 directly to the sound system. After that, I went back to the SACD option on the console, and it immediately blew up my room, even on a lower volume. I have this set for 5.1 surround sound, and it was obvious right away that more of it was being used, which unfortunately I can't really demonstrate here without getting the video blocked. That's about all I can play. The biggest thing I noticed were the back speakers being used quite a bit more with different instruments and even crowd noise coming through. It gave the experience you would expect with a surround sound system, where rather than having the sound in front of you the whole time, it makes you feel like you're at the center of the whole thing. I will say it's kind of a shame we only have the stock graphics playing on the PS3. At least this Earth one looks pretty cool. Unfortunately for super audio CDs, the market was more receptive to convenience and pricing, with the option to download music taking over, even if the quality difference was significant. For what it's worth, SACD isn't completely dead, with some releases still happening to this day, although the sector is considered fairly niche at this point. So hopefully my explanation for super audio CDs didn't annoy the audio crowd too much, but if none of that annoyed them, this next part probably will. So here's something interesting about your early PS3. It's actually fairly sought after for one specific use case that has nothing to do with games. It turns out this console makes for a great way to back up and preserve super audio CD tracks. A while back, the homebrew community actually came up with an application called SACD Ripper, which uses the PS3 to decode the encryption on the disc and rip the tracks to a PC. It's funny to think there's a whole community that looks to these original PS3 consoles for something other than PS2 backwards compatibility, but after seeing some of the steps you need to go through for other methods of backing up SACDs, it makes a lot of sense. Also, can that specific MediaTek equipped Blu-ray player that just happens to be compatible for ripping SACDs play Metal Gear Solid 4? Yeah, that's what I thought. The PS3 continues to surprise me with everything it's able to do. The price was steep when it released, sure, but Sony really did everything they could to make it that center of the living room all in one box. SACD and Blu-ray playback alone could be argued made it worth that $600 price tag, but for both of those to hit, you have to find a very specific crowd that just didn't overlap with what gamers wanted, which was just good games. You know, in a way, the PlayStation 3 console still remains Sony's best media box, like all-in-one system. The PS5 and the PS4 couldn't even play music CDs. No, seriously, try to put an audio CD in your PlayStation 5 or even your PlayStation 4 right now and let me know down in the comments what exactly happens. It's just impressive looking back on all the stuff that the PS3 was capable of, even back in 2006. But let me know what you guys thought about all of this here today with the Super Audio CD, especially if this is the first time you've heard about it, or if you're someone who's actually been using this format for quite some time. Let me know your experiences with it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.